Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange, and you're joining us for our weekly market recap. I'm joined today by my co-host, Bruce Campbell with StoneCastle Investment Management. Thank you for joining me, Bruce.
Yeah, it's good to be here on a holiday shortened week, but with lots of information.
It was a very short week, but a lot did happen this week. So we're going to break down a bunch of stuff. We're going to talk about Canadian bank earnings. We're going to touch on oil and gas. There's some stuff going on there. Reddit, the short squeeze is back. We're going to talk about it once again. There was another big move with AMC Entertainment. We're going to talk about another big merger in the cannabis space, HEXO and Redecan. And we're going to finish off with a little bit on esports. So why don't we start with the Canadian bank earnings? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a number of the banks report this week. I guess the only one that we're waiting to have reported is Bank of Nova Scotia, and the numbers were really quite fantastic across the board. We really can't complain, and CIBC was the one that led with the biggest beat, and all of them were up. They beat the consensus numbers by at least 10%. So it's obviously moving the TSX higher. We're at an all-time high in the TSX, and a large part of that's been by the financials.
From my days back in the brokerage world, I remember Canadian banks they're pretty well regarded globally, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to 2008, they were some of the most solid banks in the world through kind of everything that happened in the financial crisis in 2008. So, obviously they are very well regarded.
It's always nice when Canada stands out a little bit there. Okay, what happened with oil and gas? There's some seasonality coming. What happened in oil and gas?
Well, I don't think we can call it oil and gas anymore. It has to be referred to as energy. But yeah, in the price of oil actually has quite strong seasonality coming over the next couple of months. So both June and July, if you look at the last 20 years of history, they're up around just a little under 70% of the time, going into to June and July. So we could have quite a strong seasonal period of time. We saw the price of oil has moved up quite dramatically, especially if you look off the bottom a year ago, but even in the last few months, it's moved up. It's consolidated here the last, probably about 6 or 8 weeks, along with, some of the companies that trade in that sector. And now it looks like, we have seasonality behind it. And, a lot of those stocks look like they could be starting to reaccelerate here and drive returns, which of course is great for the Canadian markets, being that, energy is a big part of the Canadian markets, and the banks also trade in line with energy because they have such, finances tied to the energy sector.
On that note of energy, because you made the clarification that it's no longer oil and gas, but energy, this week, the Canadian Association of Oil Well Drilling Contractors came out and they are opting to do a name change. They say that this name change is so that they can broaden their participants and open up the doors a little bit more to other parts of the industry. But there's also kind of a theory that the term oil and gas just is not in favor of the public anymore. So they're replacing oil well drilling with energy. Is this a trend we're going to start to see? Is oil and gas just not to be used anymore?
Well, it depends if you're in Alberta or not, I would imagine. But if you aren't in Alberta, yeah, I mean, obviously that's a trend that, has probably taken shape over the last 3 or 4 years, this move to ESG. And now, kind of anytime we meet with an oil company, they still talk, they have a slide in their deck, and it's usually close to the front about ESG and what they're doing, to really show the world that they're not this dirty business, but that, they provide energy and that it's clean, and that's, in some cases it can be, a lot cleaner than other alternatives that are out there.
I think I read somewhere that Exxon, there was a small activist fund, and they were going up against Exxon for some of their practices, and I think they ended up with 2 seats on the board, if I read that correctly. Don't quote me on that, but it's interesting to start to see some of these shifts happen within that sector.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a theme in the investment management business. It's something that 5 years ago was barely on the radar, and now there's a lot of different research services that actually screen out and score companies based on their ESG ranking. And of course, the thought is that companies that have stronger ESG ratings will have, more interest from investment managers and investors, and that'll drive the stock price higher than someone who isn't as concerned about ESG.
Right. Is that something that you look at when you're looking at investments? Is that important to you guys?
It's not. It's certainly not a primary function that we look at. It's buried down kind of in our process, and it is a factor, but it's not a heavyweight factor.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it really comes down to fundamentals in the end. Um, Reddit. I love these stories. So we've had, I think this is the third big story of 2021 with Reddit, and it's the Wall Street Bets forum. They were at it again. They're attempting another short squeeze, or it seems like they did attempt it. Tell us what happened with AMC Entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big movie chain down in the US. The speculation is that, through everything that happens, that they could be the, only one that's kind of left standing when everything, is finished with COVID and we kind of move on to life after COVID. But there was a fairly significant short position in that stock as, of course, finances have been challenging, and the Reddit people have, done their magic and pointed out the fact that this big short position was there. And if they started buying, there could be a short squeeze. And lo and behold, there's been a fairly significant short squeeze. So from the 20th of May till now, the stock's pretty much gone straight up. And then if you break down the intraday today, it was up quite dramatically earlier today. It's been negative on the day. And, kind of as we do this with, sort of an hour and a half or so left to go in trading, it's right around the flat line on the day. So you can see how, this group, of sort of unassociated people, but with a purpose, can really move stocks.
So, Bruce, do you mind? I mean, we've talked about this a few times this year, but do you mind just a quick recap of what a short squeeze is and how these guys are accomplishing this?
Yeah, for sure. So anytime that we talk about short sellers, effectively what they've done is they've gone out and borrowed the shares. So let's say I believe that AMC is going to go down, and I don't own any of the stock, but you do. I can borrow your shares from you and then sell that into the market. So I've made that sale of shares, but they're actually yours. And if the stock price goes down, I buy them back, give them back to you, and I've made the difference between what I sold, where I sold it, and what I buy it back for. Now the challenge comes is that, there's short data delivered on all stocks because you have to actually mark your trade as a short sale when you sell it. And so as a result, people can track the short positions. In a case where there's a large short position, what ends up happening is all these short sellers are owning, or they're short stock, so they want the stock price to go down. If it starts to go up, then they get into a situation where now they're losing money. And of course, on the upside, it's infinite the amount of money that they could potentially lose if the stock just keeps on going up. So they have to cover to control their losses in their portfolio. And as they cover, they're buying. So you get the buying from the crew that came in to start with at sort of low prices. And then you get the buying that comes in from the managers who are short, covering their short. And then of course, these things just take on a life of their own. And, pretty soon the Uber drivers are talking about it. And then, it just completely explodes like it did with GameStop. And, you see these exponential moves in a short period of time.
Well, and the reason I wanted you to explain that, and again, it's so, if you're shorting a stock at $20 and it goes down to zero, you can make $20. If you shorted it, it starts to go up. It's infinite what it can go to. But also what happens is as it starts to creep up, quite often your brokerage firm will say either pay more money to hold this position or get yourself out of it, because they don't want that on their books and their liability. So as these guys get together in these forums like Reddit, they see, as you said, that short position that's quite large, and they decide to go after it, start pushing it up, which, as you said, then forces those people, so it continues to go up. But here's the reason I wanted you to explain that, because AMC Entertainment, I took a little look at them. They've it looks like they almost tripled this week in share price. Their share price is now soared a market cap of over 15 billion, but that's trading at 20 times EBITDA, and they have 5.5 billion in debt. And we currently still live in a pandemic where people aren't necessarily going out and spending money on this kind of entertainment. Would you ever invest in this company just as it stands today?
Yeah, I mean, it probably wouldn't meet a lot of the criteria that we're looking for, just because they're their earnings trend is negative, and we're looking for the opposite of that. But certainly a value investor would look at this. What could be really interesting would be, and I believe they've already come to the market once this year, but if they came to market and were able to tap the markets for more capital because their stock price is higher up now, then they could have growth capital for when they do come out of this, and we go back into kind of a quote unquote more normal circumstance where we're looking for that type of entertainment, and they could maybe explode their growth on what the next business could be.
So they could use this as an opportunity if they do it right. But still, it's a very sophisticated move, and it almost makes me nervous that it's become such a hot topic, because I worry that people are try to jump in on it that might not know enough about it, because that's pretty speculative, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some people that you hear stories of them getting burned on GameStop for sure, and that was basically they were just late to to the whole trading fiasco.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about another big merger in the cannabis space. We're seeing it in Canada. This is between HEXO and Redecan. They combined will now be the #1 market share in Canadian rec cannabis. It was done as a share purchase agreement, valued at 925. Sorry, I think some was cash and some was shares, like 500 in shares and 425 in cash, something along those lines. They also have just closed a financing of $360 million via senior secured convertible note. What do you think about this merger? I mean, it's another big merger, but this one's in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked on this show quite a bit about, kind of the mergers in the cannabis sector and how we expected that to continue. You've seen a few, this year already. You saw Zenabis. Now you've seen Redecan, you saw 48 North. There's been quite a few going on in Canada and in the US as well. You've seen some. I think this trend's here and it'll probably stay. In Canada, obviously, you're trying to get producers who are trying to get efficient. Redecan has, they've got some quite strong selling products in Canada in the rec market. HEXO, obviously, they're trying to continue to expand and grow and take market share. Their CEO is quite aggressive. So, this is a move that they've made in the US. You're seeing, you're seeing that as well as, some of these MSOs start to cross borders in order to really diversify their business for the day that, things change from a legal standpoint to become, kind of more legal or less illegal than they are now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you bring up 48 North and Zenabis. Those were both within HEXO, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So my question for you is, I was looking at that. So 48 North was done, I think, just in February. It was valued at about 50 million. Zenabis might have been January. I can't remember the dates there. But that was valued at 235 million. Oh, that was in February, the Zenabis one. Do you think, is this a great thing, or are they expanding too quickly, or what do you think about this?
Well, it seems like they each kind of have their strategic piece, and I would suspect that that's what the CEO has in mind. Is that if you look at Zenabis, they obviously have a large greenhouse operation that they have out in the west, and then they have operation out east that is smaller and kind of more crafty. You look at 48 North, and it's kind of more on the craft outdoor side of things, and then you look at Redecan, and they have products that are in a lot of cases, in a lot of categories, are in the top 5. And so you can see there's different pieces that the CEO is putting together to have one really consolidated company that sort of hits all the aspects of what's hot right now in cannabis.
Well, Redecan was a private company, and you don't see that quite as often. You see a lot of amalgamation and mergers between public companies, but I don't know if we see quite as often these types of transactions with an actual private company, valued at 925 million. And it looks like they've been quite active for over 30 years. So it seems like pretty good acquisition for them.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously why we don't see very many private companies of this size is it takes a tremendous amount of capital to build a cannabis facility and also to get the products to market.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about esports. So esports, I remember when esports, we did an event with the CSE and it was pre-pandemic and it was in June. So I'm going to guess it was 2 years ago. I didn't know what esports was. So it was a bit of a learning curve for myself to figure out what it was. And we had an event and I couldn't believe how popular that event was. It's a big thing. People love this space. It seemed to kind of come to market and then slow down and quieted down a bit. Obviously, esports itself is the sport of watching gaming. So a big part of it was people getting together in like Rogers Arena and watching it. With the pandemic, that hasn't happened as much, but we've seen this on the rise. So we have two new companies that have come to the CSE. Wonder Gaming, they came to us via RTO. They actually just brought on Hockey Hall of Fame Paul Kofi. He is in the NHL. He's slated as one of the top 100 NHL players of all time. So he's come on as a director. And then we've also seen Game On come and list with us. They're actually, they have their official listing, but they don't commence trading till next week. And they are part of the incubator Victory Square, which is a CSC issuer, and they've been a great supporter to us. So we're seeing a bunch of these companies come in the esports space. What do you, as a fund manager, think of esports?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges that advertisers have is trying to reach a specific demographic that really is the esports demographic. It's, those males 16 to 35. And so this is a huge area of growth, and it's one that every advertiser, every marketer is trying to get in on. And so, as the growth of the sport develops, there's also other avenues to participate. And now you're starting to see some of the gambling, different gambling companies in esports starting to show up as well. And, so we do watch the sector quite closely. We've made some investments in the past. We have some right now. And it's certainly a sector that we think, has tremendous growth potential in front of it. The challenge that we've always faced in esports is trying to figure out where the money goes and who makes the money from a corporate standpoint, which has been challenging because a lot of it is driven by the absolute biggest companies, typically the gaming companies themselves. But now that's starting to change as, there's different avenues for people to spend their money, not just advertising, but gambling now, events and merchandise.
Absolutely. I was just warned by our producer, James Black, that I mispronounced. It's Paul Coffey. So for all of those hockey fans out there, I'm sorry I mispronounced it. Paul Coffey in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I think we'll probably see a lot of athletes come to this market and kind of, ambassadorships and directorships. We'll see a lot of that. I know when I was looking at it 2 years ago, it seemed to me that there was a few things. One is sponsorship is a big thing. Teams, but teams is a bit funny because they put teams together they're young adults in these teams. I mean, in Asia, some of them are very young teens. So the teams will kind of move and shake, not like pro athletes where you have kind of these, teams that are put together and they stay there for a period of time. And then the other thing was the underlying infrastructure. So what it takes as far as just, kind of having all of these gaming units all happen, internet and infrastructure and that part of thing. And then, of course, the final element, I think a big part is going to be the betting, right? So being able to make bets on these games. So I'm not surprised that it's making a comeback. I'm not surprised that we're seeing more companies. I wish these guys all the best. I know that it is a very well-loved sector in the capital market. So I guess I'll find out more as we all do. Okay, Bruce, what are we going to think about? I know there's something happening Sunday, so tell us what's happening this weekend and what to think about going into next week.
Yeah, so Sunday night, we're going to see the Chinese PMI number, and that, typically gives you a snapshot on what's happening with the Chinese economy, which in Canada has a big impact because of all of our natural resources. So, that's going to be an interesting number to see. The US is closed on Monday. There's no trading. So that's obviously going to have a bit of a bearing on Canadian volumes. And then the last thing that we're watching is technology. I mean, it's been a strong week for technology and the NASDAQ. And, we're looking to see if, we could be starting to see the next acceleration back in some of these technology names again that, have really had a pause here since, kind of mid-February.
We'll watch and see. I also want to end off the week by just saying we wrapped up the Cannabis Investors Series this past Tuesday. It was a 4-week program. It was amazing. I think it's probably one of the better pieces of content series that we've put together to date. There were some amazing thought leaders, over 60 speakers throughout the whole 4 weeks. And I think we highlighted dozens of our CSC issuers within the space. All of that information is on CSC TV. If you subscribe, we will let you know when that stuff comes to CSC TV. The actual sessions that were every Tuesday are on CSC TV right now. Some of the bigger names, we have full-length interviews, and those will be coming up. So if you subscribe, we'll let you know. Also, we'll let you know when we're doing the market recap every week. So on that note, Bruce, thank you so much for another great week. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Yeah.